It was supposed to be a normal day. Just another run to the grocery store before the rain hit hard. But destiny doesn't wait for the right weather, and it sure doesn't ask for permission. If you're watching this right now, remember, one moment can change everything. Just like it did for Jake Miller, a single dad who thought his life was already written. Little did he know, fate was driving straight toward him, and it wore the face of a ghost from the past. Jake Miller was no stranger to pain. At just 35, he had already buried the love of his life, Leah. A tragic car crash 2 years ago had left him shattered, raising their 4-year-old son, Eli, alone on the edges of a quiet mountain town. Life was hard, but Jake was tougher. He worked long hours at the local mechanic shop and spent every free second teaching Eli how to tie his shoes, make pancakes, or chase fireflies like his mama used to. He had learned to live with the ache. The empty side of the bed. The silence in the kitchen where Leah once danced. The photo frame that still stood on the mantel, never gathering dust because he cleaned it every day with a trembling hand. Jake had promised her he'd never let Eli forget her, and he kept that promise like it was stitched into his skin. That afternoon, the sky had turned an ominous gray. Thunder growled in the distance like a warning. Jake, with Eli bundled up in the passenger seat of his old blue truck, was driving back from town. He glanced in the rearview mirror just as the rain began to fall in heavy, angry sheets. Suddenly, headlights cut through the storm. A sleek black car was swerving out of control on the slick mountain curve ahead. Jake slammed the brakes. "Eli, stay in the truck," he shouted, even before the crash happened. The sound was deafening, metal twisting, glass shattering, a scream swallowed by the storm. The car flipped once. Twice. Then came to a stop, smoking and broken, just feet from the edge of the ravine. Jake's instincts kicked in. He leapt from the truck and ran into the rain. He could barely see through the downpour, but he found the wreck fast. The door was crumpled like paper. Inside was a woman, unconscious, her face bloodied and pinned against the steering wheel. He didn't stop to think. He yanked open the twisted metal with raw hands and pulled her out as gently but quickly as he could. She was limp but breathing. He laid her on the ground and shouted her name, though he didn't even know it. Then he saw her face. His breath stopped. She looked like Leah. Not just a little. Not like someone who reminded him of her. No. This woman was Leah. Or, no, not Leah. Her eyes were different, sharper. Her jawline a touch stronger. But she was the mirror of the woman he had mourned. A twin? No, Leah didn't have a twin. At least not one he ever met. Ambulance sirens screamed in the distance. Jake stood soaked, staring at the stranger who looked like the ghost he couldn't forget. And that was just the beginning. Hours passed. Jake was back home, pacing. Eli had fallen asleep in his arms on the worn leather couch. The storm had passed, but the storm inside Jake had only grown. Who was she? He couldn't shake the image of her face. The hospital wouldn't tell him much, privacy laws. She was stable, unconscious, and under observation. That was all. But Jake wasn't just curious. He was shaken to the core. He drove to the hospital the next morning after dropping Eli at school. He didn't know what he would say or if she would even be awake. When he stepped into her room, the woman turned to look at him. "Leah," he whispered. Her eyes widened. She blinked, and a tear slipped down her cheek. "No," she said, her voice soft. "I'm not Leah. I'm Layla. Her sister." Jake staggered back like he'd been punched. "Her, what?" She nodded slowly. "We were estranged. She never told you about me, did she?" Jake shook his head. He felt like the floor had disappeared. "She never said anything." Layla turned her head toward the window, her expression unreadable. "I don't blame her." And just like that, a new storm began brewing. One with questions heavier than thunder. Why had Leah never told him she had a sister? Why had this woman, Layla, come here? And why now? And most of all, what did it mean that she was a millionaire with secrets of her own? Because Layla hadn't just come for closure. She came to rewrite the past. And Jake Miller's life was about to change forever. Layla had never imagined her return would happen like this, bloodied, unconscious, and pulled from the wreckage by the very man her sister had loved. Her mind felt like it was peeling back layers of grief she'd tried to bury years ago. But now she lay in a hospital bed, staring at Jake, Leah's widower, and realizing she couldn't keep running from the past anymore. Jake sat quietly in the hospital chair beside her, hands clasped, head bowed slightly. He looked so different from the photos she had secretly seen online over the years, more weathered, more guarded, but still kind. The same man Leah had written about in her letters. "I don't understand," Jake finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "Why would Leah hide you from me? Why didn't you come to the funeral?" Layla swallowed hard. "Because I didn't think I deserved to." He looked at her, eyes narrowing. She took a breath. "Jake, Leah and I hadn't spoken in almost 7 years before she died. We fought after our parents passed. She blamed me for not being there for her. I left to travel, to escape the pain. I was in Europe when she got married. I only found out she was gone months after it happened." Her voice cracked, and she turned away. By then, it felt too late to show up. What would I have been? A stranger? A ghost? Jake's heart clenched. "She never told me." Layla looked back at him, tears brimming. "Because she loved you. And she was ashamed of me." The room fell silent again, only the beeping of the monitor filling the air between them. "But why come now?" Jake asked. Layla hesitated. "Because I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I didn't come for closure, I came to find Eli. I came to make peace. And maybe, to help." Jake frowned. "Help?" Layla nodded slowly. "I'm not just Leah's sister. I'm also the CEO of our family's company now. I've inherited everything. I live alone in a penthouse in Manhattan. My life is full of everything, except love. Except family. When I found out about you and Eli, I knew I had to come see for myself." Jake stood, pacing the room now. "So what, you just wanted to check on your nephew? After years?" "No," she said quickly. "I wanted to be a part of his life. If you'll let me." Jake's jaw tensed. "He's not a charity case, Layla." She sat up straighter despite her pain. "I know that. I'm not here out of pity. I'm here because he's my blood. And because I owe my sister, and you." Jake didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the window, watching the clouds drift apart, letting sun filter through. The storm was over. Outside, the world looked clean again. Over the next week, Jake found himself bringing Eli to visit Layla. At first, he wasn't sure why, maybe because Eli asked about the lady from the hospital. Maybe because he saw something genuine in Layla's eyes that didn't seem rehearsed. Layla, for her part, fell for Eli instantly. He was just like Leah, curious, funny, and kind-hearted. They played puzzles, ate orange slices, and laughed like they'd known each other for years. And Jake? He watched them, torn between past and present, guilt and hope. Slowly, a rhythm formed. Layla recovered enough to move into a rented cabin nearby while she sorted out her plans. Jake offered to help her settle in. She joined them for dinners. They talked about Leah, finally. The good memories. The secrets. The regrets. And something began to bloom. One evening, under a sky painted with stars, Jake and Layla sat on the porch, sipping coffee after Eli had gone to bed. "I used to think I'd never let anyone close again," Jake confessed. "It felt like loving someone would mean betraying Leah's memory." Layla looked at him, eyes gentle. "But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe loving again honors her. Maybe it's proof she taught you how. He turned to her. You really believe that? She nodded. I think love grows, Jake. Even in the ashes. That night, they didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. Weeks passed. Layla spent more time in the small town. She invested in local businesses, donated to the school Eli attended, and even bought the struggling auto shop Jake worked at, silently, through a legal team, so he could finally own the place and not just survive. When Jake found out, he confronted her. You didn't have to do that, he said, frustrated and overwhelmed. Why would you? Because I believe in you, she answered softly. And I believe Leah would have wanted you to have more than just memories. She would have wanted you to live again. Jake was silent. Then, he pulled her into a hug he didn't know he needed until her arms wrapped around him tightly. I don't know what this is between us, he murmured, but I know I don't want to let it go. Layla smiled against his chest. Then don't. Months later, Jake stood in the backyard of his newly repaired house. The garden Leah once planted was blooming again. Eli ran through the sprinklers, laughing. And beside Jake stood Layla, holding a lemonade in one hand and his in the other. They weren't trying to replace Leah. No one ever could. But they were building something new, from wreckage, from grief, from fate's strange kindness. Sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places, a hospital room, a wrecked car, or a childhood memory that refuses to fade. And sometimes, healing begins when we dare to open the door again. Speech balloon if this story moved you even a little, if you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to like this video. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to our channel for more emotional, heartwarming stories that will stay with you long after the screen fades. Your support means we can keep sharing moments that matter. Thank you for watching. Red Heart.